Hey, how's it going, everybody? Thanks, Pablo. It's good to be here. Thank you all for coming. I know a lot of you, but some of you I don't know. So I'm a Fulbright U.S. scholar here studying from the U.S., but I'm studying here through the University of Iceland at the Research Center. Here we go. Oop, didn't work.
No, there we go. It just takes a second to pop up.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Do you guys have a laser pointer by chance?
We don't.
Nah, no need. Okay, cool. So today I'm going to talk to you guys about particles and whether or not mysticetes use them. And we think they do. So all animals use sound. Pretty much every animal that you know of uses sound in some form to communicate. It's an important way of how they interact with their environment. But to start off, I want to go back to the basics of sound. So sound is caused by areas of compression and rarefaction in the molecules of a medium. And then those areas of compression and rarefaction correspond to increases or decreases in pressure. Now that pressure wave then propagates through the medium. And we can measure that pressure wave with sensors such as microphones or our ears, right? Our ears are essentially pressure sensors. Now there's another component of sound that gets overlooked a lot, and that is the particle motion component of sound. So as the pressure wave propagates through the environment, it changes the acceleration and the velocity with which the individual particles vibrate. Now we can actually measure those changes in particle motion with sensors such as accelerometers. Now, the vast majority of research on the way that animals use sound has focused on the pressure component. And that makes sense because pretty much all terrestrial vertebrate animals have evolved to hear and use the pressure component of sound, but not the particle motion component. However, there are some mammals that have evolved to hear and utilize the particle motion component of sound in their communication system. So for example, the elephant, the hippo, and the elephant seal, they all have evolved to detect and use particle motion. Now one of the things that they have in common with their communication systems is that they are large animals. They produce very low frequency vocalizations that they use to communicate over long distances. And they all have auditory systems that are especially adapted to hear those low frequency sounds. Now does that sound familiar? Because that's pretty much the same sorts of characteristics that mysticete whales or baleen whales all have as well. And so it's actually been hypothesized that based on the anatomical characteristics, various anatomy studies and modeling studies have led people to believe that mysticetes probably hear and utilize particle motion as well. And so the overarching general research question that we're looking at for this project is particle motion a component of mysticete acoustic communication? Now to answer this question, the best place to start would be can they actually hear it? If they can't hear it, then it's highly unlikely that they actually use it. However, this is easier said than done. There's been no empirical studies of hearing capabilities in mysticetes, and that's for obvious reasons that it's very hard to get a hold of one to actually, test it in the controlled experimental circumstances that you need. So the next best thing is if they're using particle motion to communicate, it stands to reason that they are producing particle motion when they vocalize. And spoiler alert, the answer is yes, they do produce particle motion. So the first study of its kind that was done in 2015, some researchers and colleagues of mine published a paper that showed that singing humpback whales produce measurable and significant amounts of particle motion when they vocalize. So we wanted to look and see if there were other species of mysticetes that do this as well. And so we were focusing on the North Atlantic right whale. And so why did we want to look at this whale? Well, first and foremost, this is a highly endangered marine mammal. It's one of the rarest marine mammals in the world. There's approximately only 450 individuals left. And so their conservation status is really important. Their habitat, particularly for acoustics, their habitat overlaps with significant human presence. So these figures down here on the left, this is a map of the waters leading into Boston on the east coast of the US. All these little dots here are vocalizing North Atlantic right whales. And so the color intensity kind of signifies how far and how loud their sounds are, and how far their sounds travel away from their location. In the other figure on the right, that super big bright spot, that's a commercial shipping vessel. And you can see that the commercial shipping vessel is way louder than the North Atlantic right whales, and it pretty much masks a lot of the areas that the right whales are. It masks the acoustic space of the right whales. And so better understanding their communication systems and their acoustic systems is a pretty big deal, particularly for species like the North Atlantic right whale. There we go. Oh, I went too fast, sorry. There we go. Okay, so to collect the data, we used an M20 particle motion sensor that's from a company called Geospectrum. Now this sensor has an underwater microphone or a hydrophone embedded inside, and it also has 3 orthogonally arranged accelerometers. Those are the sensors that we use to measure and detect particle motion. So pretty much we went out on a boat in Cape Cod Bay in Massachusetts, and we looked for groups of North Atlantic right whales that were kind of feeding at the surface. So this is what we were looking for. This is a video of a North Atlantic right whale doing a behavior called skim feeding. And so they do this in groups. Pretty much they just swim along the surface of the water with their mouths open and let all the wonderful good bits filter into their baleen. And it's really funny to watch. It's pretty cool. So what you're seeing there is the rostrum tip of the dorsal side. And they're just going nice and slow, and they just hang out and swim in figure-8 patterns. So when we found a group of right whales doing this, we'd stop the boat, drop our M20 sensor over the side at a depth of about 10 meters, which you can see right there, and then we'd start the recording, and everything's controlled by a computer topside inside the boat. And so whenever we found whales, we'd go and do recordings, and here are some of the results. So what you're seeing here in this left panel, this is a figure that shows 2 different types of right whale vocalizations. These left 2 columns here are examples of what's called a gunshot call. And I'm going to play an example of this real quick. Let's see if it works. I don't think so. Is the volume on by chance?
Should be.
Should be? Alright, well maybe it just isn't going to work. Here's what we're going to do. I want you all to hear this because it's a really, really fun, unique sound.
Make an impression.
Nope.
Hammond. Oxville.
Here, we'll just do this one. I don't think it's hooked up. Okay, well, sorry guys, you don't get to hear the gunshot call. We'll move on, it's all good, man. I was just hitting play right there. I don't want to delay us too much, so no worries. I will move along. There we go. Okay, so over here these 2 columns show gunshot calls, and over here these 2 columns show another call called an upsweep. All right, it's a tonal vocalization. Now the top view right here, these are called spectrograms. It's just a way to view the frequency components of a sound over time. Right here we have the pressure waveform of the hydrophone. So this is what you stereotypically associate with sound, right? That's these graphs right here. And all these graphs down here, they show the waveform or the change in particle velocity in the X, Y, and Z accelerometers. So we have pretty much, we can get the acceleration in 3-dimensional space. The take-home message right here from this figure is that as you have a call, there's clearly a signal in the pressure domain, but there's also clearly measurable signal energies of particle motion in the X, Y, and Z domain. In some calls, a little bit more in different planes, but generally speaking, it's clear that North Atlantic right whales produce particle motion when they vocalize. Now the graph over on the right, what that is showing is that you have received level, so essentially the sound intensity on the x-axis, and you have the magnitude of the particle velocity on the y-axis. The regression line is pretty much a one-to-one line. So what you can see, what that shows is that as the intensity of the sound increases, there is a corresponding linear increase in the magnitude of the particle motion. Come on. Not yet.